අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Tuesday, the 27th of June 2023. Prez assured, President Ranil Wickremesinghe confirms that domestic debt restructuring will not affect bank deposits or superannuation funds.
හානියක් වෙනවා නම් මං කියන්නම් මීට ඉස්සෙල්ලත් කිව්වනේ.
History unraveled. Sri Lanka's historic Mahavamsa listed among the 64 new items of UNESCO's Memory of the World.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරම.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a warm welcome to today's edition of AdaDerana's English News First at 9. Let's take a look at your top story. President Ranil Wickremesinghe has assured that the domestic debt restructuring process will not affect superannuation funds, including the Employee Provident Fund of the members of the public. Addressing the opening of the new building of the Gampaha District Secretariat, the President spoke freely about the challenges his administration initially faced, including the lack of confidence by members of the opposition. He went on to add that the domestic debt restructuring process will not have an impact on the banking system's stability. The head of state also reiterated that the debt restructuring proposal will be approved in Parliament over the upcoming weekend.
The new building of the Gampaha District Secretariat was declared open today under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
අපි ණය ගෙවන්න බැරි බංකොලොත් රටක් හැටියට තියෙනවා. ඒක බාරගත්තේ මේක අවුරුද්දක් තුලදී කරමු කියලා. මොකක් අය කිව්වා මේක කරන්න බෑ. අඩු ගානේ බංකොලොත් භාවයෙන් යන්න ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම අවුරුදු දෙකක් තුනක් යනවා කියලා. අපි කිව්වා ඒක කරමු කියලා. අපිට තිබුණේ ප්‍රශ්නේ මම දැන් කියන්න. 2022 වර්ෂයේ අවසාන වන විට ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ සමස්ත රාජ්‍ය ණය ඩොලර් මිලියන 83000යි. අපිට යන්න පුළුවන් එකම මාර්ගය අපේ ණය අපි ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කරනවා. අපි ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත නොකර ඉදිරියට ගියොත් අපිට මේ සංවර්ධන කළා මේ වරායල් මුකුත් කරන්න බැරි වෙනවා. අපිට මේ උදව් කරන්න විදේශ ණය හිමියන් කැමැත්ත ප්‍රකාශ කළා තියෙනවා. ඒ කැමැත්ත ප්‍රකාශ කරනකොට කිව්වා විදේශ ණයයි දේශීය ණයයි දෙකම අඩු කරගන්න කියලා. ඒ නිසා අපි බලන්නේ විදේශ ණයකරුවන්ගෙන් අපි ඉල්ලන්නේ ඉදිරි වසර 5 තුල ඩොලර් මිලියන 17000කින් අපිට සහනයක් දෙන්න කියලා. ඒ වගේම අපිට දේශීය ණයකරුවන්ගෙන් සහනයක් ගන්න තියෙනවා. ඉතින් අපි දේශීය ණයයි විදේශීය ණයයි දෙකම ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කරලා දැන් ඒ යෝජනා සකස් කරගෙන යනවා. හෙට අපි කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයට ඉදිරිපත් කරනවා. ඒ වගේම ආණ්ඩු පක්ෂ කණ්ඩායමට දැනුවත් කරනවා. ඒ වගේම පක්ෂ දේශපාලන නායකයන් දැනුවත් කරනවා. අට ඕනේ ඔක්කොම පක්ෂ එකතු කරලා මේ වැඩේ කරන්න. ඊපස්සේ සතිය අන්තයේ මේක සම්මත කරගන්න. දේශීය ණය ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කිරීම මගින් මේ රට බැංකු පද්ධතියේ ස්ථායීතාවයට හෝ කිසිදු රාජ්‍ය හෝ පුද්ගලික බැංකුවේ සාහිතාවයට බලපෑමක් එල්ල වෙන්නේ නැහැ. බැංකු ගිණුම් මිලියන 50ක් තියෙනවා. ඒවට හානියක් නොවන විදිහට මේ ටික කරන්නේ. හානියක් වෙනවා නම් මම කියන්නම්. මම ඊට ඉස්සෙල්ලත් කිව්වනේ දැනට ගෙවනු ලබන බැංකු තැන්පතු සඳහා කිසිදු පොලියකටවත් මේන් බලපෑමක් ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මේකෙන් බලපෑම ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒත් අපි උද්දමනය අඩු කරනකොට පොලිය අඩු වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක වෙන එකක්. දේශීය ණය ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කිරීම මගින් සේවක අර්ථසාධක අරමුදල ඇතුළු කිසිදු අධි විශ්‍රාමික අරමුදල් වල සමාජික ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨයට බලපෑමක්වත් එල්ල වෙන්නේ නැහැ. දේශපාලනෙන් තොරව මේ සහයෝගය දෙන්න. මේක කරනවා නම් සැප්තැම්බර් මාසයේ අවසන් වෙන්න ඉස්සෙල්ලා අපේ බංකොලොත් භාවය නැති කර ගන්න පුළුවන්. අපිට හැමදාම හිඟන જાතියක් වෙන්න බෑ.
Cabinet last evening approved the signing of an agreement with the World Bank to obtain $500 million worth of budgetary support to Sri Lanka. According to Reuters quoting services, the proposed World Bank budgetary funding is likely to come in 2 tranches of $250 million each. This happens to be the largest funding tranche dispersed to the cash-strapped country since the IMF facility was approved earlier this year.
At the cabinet meeting last evening, Approval was granted to enter into an agreement with the World Bank to obtain budgetary support worth $500 million. This is the biggest funding tranche that will be disbursed to Sri Lanka since an IMF bailout of $2.9 billion was approved in March this year. According to Reuters, the proposed World Bank budgetary funding is likely to be paid out in two tranches of $250 million each. Reuters quoting sources stated that the first tranche is likely to be disbursed immediately after board approval, with the next possibly in October, as the bank observes the progress of Sri Lanka's debt restructuring and the first review of the IMF program due in September. Further, Reuters reported that the World Bank is also expected to approve $200 million for programs to assist the poor, whose numbers have doubled to 25% of the total population due to the economic crisis last year. With the welfare support of $200 million, the assistance from World Bank will amount to $700 million.
On that note, the Cabinet of Ministers convened yesterday to look at some key issues. The main story is that they have cleared the implementation of legislation to set up a gambling regulatory authority. The gambling regulator will ensure that comprehensive taxes are collected, the threat of criminal activity monitored, casinos properly regulated, and enhance participation from world-renowned casino operators on the strength of a robust governing mechanism. Further, a $25 million foreign direct investment stands to make its way into the country following a cabinet decision to lease a plot of land on the Mausakala Reservoir for the development of a hotel complex. With that, here's a brief look at key decisions taken at the cabinet meeting this week.
The Cabinet approved the proposal to direct the legal draftsman to draft a bill to establish Gambling Regularization Authority. The establishment of Regularization Authority will affect the gambling establishment operators in charging expected tariffs from gambling, prevention of crimes related to gambling, minimizing the negative impact on individual and society through gambling, and enhancing the visibility of Sri Lanka to encourage world-renowned operators to enter the market. Meanwhile, UAE's Capital Investment LLC has submitted a project proposal to acquire a plot of land adjacent to the Mausakala Reservoir and a small island located on the same reservoir on a long-term lease basis for a project to build and run a hotel complex by using $25 million as a direct foreign investment. As such, the Cabinet of Ministers yesterday granted approval to allocate these lands on lease basis and to implement the proposal project by obtaining the agreement of the relevant institutions. In the meantime, the United Nations Development Programme has agreed to provide a grant of approximately $4 million to the Global Environment Facility for the implementation of a project for streamlining biodiversity and sustainable land management in Sri Lanka's wetlands. Accordingly, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the proposal presented by the Minister of Environment to enter into an agreement between the UNDP and the Ministry of Environment in order to obtain the relevant grant for the proposed project. The project is planned to be implemented through public, private and community partnerships in the districts of Nuwara, Ratnapura, Kegal, Kalutara, Galle and Mathura. In more decisions, the Cabinet gave the green light to publish the Social Security Contribution Tax Amendment Bill in the Government Gazette and submit it for the Parliament approval upon receiving the Attorney General's clearance. Earlier this year, Cabinet approval was granted to introduce several amendments to the Social Security Contribution Levy Act No. 25 of 2022, and the legal draftsman was also instructed to prepare the amended bill. Further, the Cabinet nodded its approval to the proposal submitted by President Ranil Wickremesinghe to take part in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, is the first trade agreement among the largest economies in Asia, including China, Indonesia, Japan and South Korea. Joining hands with the said agreement opens doors for investing more economic and other benefits to Sri Lanka.
Now in some historic news, the Mahavamsa, a publication otherwise known as the Great Chronicle by the Sufi poet and philosopher Maulana, has been listed among the 64 new items of documentary heritage inscribed on the UNESCO's Memory of the World International Register in 2023. The unique publication explores a historiographical perspective to chronological Sri Lanka's history dating back to 6 BC. With these new additions from 56 countries and organizations, the Memory of the World Register now documents 494 documentary heritage collections from all regions of the world.
Created by UNESCO in 1992, the Memory of the World program aims to prevent the irrevocable loss of documentary heritage, documents or collection of documents of significant and enduring value, whether on paper, audiovisual, digital or any other support. The program also aims to safeguard this heritage and make it more accessible to the general public. The Memory of the World Register lists documentary heritage that has been recommended by the International Advisory Committee and endorsed by the Director General of UNESCO as corresponding to the selection criteria regarding world significance and outstanding universal value. Last week, UNESCO announced the inscription of 64 new documentary collections from 56 countries and organizations across the globe, bringing the total number of listed collections to 494. 64 collections added this year include complete works of the Sufi poet and philosopher Maulana, the records and sound documents of the EMI Archive Trust, and the Great Chronicle of Sri Lanka, the Mahavamsa. The Mahavamsa is the first of its kind in South Asia, initiating a mature historiographic tradition presenting Sri Lanka's history in a chronological order from the 6th century BC. According to the UNESCO, the authenticity of the facts provided in the document have been confirmed through archaeological research conducted in Sri Lanka and India. The Mahavamsa is an important historical source in South Asia, containing crucial information about the lifetime of the Buddha, the Emperor Asoka, and the rise of Buddhism as a world religion. The document played a significant role in popularizing Buddhism in Southeast Asia and contributed singularly to the identity of Emperor Asoka in the Indian history. Currently, the oldest palm leaf manuscript of the Mahavamsa lies safe at the library of the University of Peradeniya.
අපේ ලංකාවේ ආණ්ඩුවත් ලංකාවේ බුද්ධ ශාසන අමාත්‍යාංශයයි ජාතික පුස්තකාලය එකතු වෙලා කොමිටියක් පත් කරා 6 දෙනෙක්ගෙන් ලංකාවේ තියෙන මහාවංශ වලින් පරණ මහාවංශ පොත මොකක්ද කියලා හොයලා බලන්න පුස්කොළ පොත. ඒ විද්‍යාත්මක කණ්ඩායමෙන් ඒකට යොදාගත්තා පෙරදින විශ්වවිද්‍යාලය තමයි මේක තියෙන්නේ කියලා. අපේ හිටපු වයිස් චාන්සලර් සහ මම කිව්වා මේක ගැන අපි ඇප්ලිකේෂන් එකක් දානවා කිව්වා යුනෙස්කෝ එකට වර්ල්ඩ් හෙරිටේජ් එකක් හැටියට පත් කරන්න කියලා.
ඇත්තට මේ පත්තිරු අනිත් ඒවා බැලුවාම යම් යම් ආකාරයක පරිච්ඡේදකරණයේ එහෙම යම් යම් වෙනස්කම් දක්නට ලැබෙනවා. නමුත් ඇත්තටම මේ යුනෙස්කෝ එකෙන් ප්‍රකාශයට පත් කරන ලද මහාවංශය එසේ වෙනස්කම් දක්නට ලැබෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඊට ව්‍යක්ත ලෙස හොඳින් හසුරුවලා තියෙන බව තමයි අපේ දැනීමට හසු වුණේ. ඒ නිසා මේ මහාවංශය එසේ යුනෙස්කෝ සඳහා නම් කරනු ලැබුවේ.
UNESCO meanwhile pointed out that the existence of number of manuscripts of the Mahavamsa in several other countries, as well as the transliteration and translation of the text of several Southeast Asian and European languages, stand testimony to its immense historical, cultural, literal, linguistic and scholarly values.
ලෝක සාහිත්‍ය පීරා බැලුවත් මේ වගේ අඛණ්ඩව අවුරුදු දහස් ගණනක් තිස්සේ රටක ඉතිහාසය ලියා තිබු ලේඛනයක් අපිට සොයා ගන්න පුළුවන් වන්නේ නැහැ. මහාවංශයේ තිබෙන තොරතුරු ඉවහල් කරගෙන ඉන්දියාවේ ඉතිහාසයේ ඇතැම් කොටස් ගොඩ නැගීමට ඉතිහාසඥයන් සමත් වුණා. ඒ නිසා තමයි යුනෙස්කෝ සංවිධානය තමන්ගේ ලෝක ස්මරණ නාමාවලියට මහාවංශය ඇතුළත් කර බව අපට අසන්නට ලැබෙන්නේ.
The Joint Apparel Association Forum calls for a reduction in industry electricity tariffs. More on this after a short commercial break. Do stay tuned.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන් කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ටීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ටීමෝ වෙතින්.
Welcome back. The Ceylon Electricity Board has announced the launch of the next phase of its e-billing system, which will come into effect from the 1st of July. In a statement, the state electricity supplier noted that customers residing in the Dehiwala, Kalaniya and Sri Jayawardhanapura areas would exclusively receive their electricity bills in digital format, either through SMS or email. The CEB stated that the conventional practice of issuing printed paper bills will be gradually discontinued with the introduction of the e-billing system. Further, the CEB is encouraging its customers to promptly register for the e-billing system as the issuance of printed papers will gradually be suspended in the coming month. Seeking the attention and cooperation of the public to ensure the successful implementation of the e-billing system, the CEB said that this initiative is expected to save approximately 100 million sheets of paper annually. State Minister of Finance Shehan Semasinghe has confirmed that 188,794 appeals and 3,304 objections have so far been received pertaining to the beneficiaries list of the Asvasuma Welfare Benefit Scheme. While previous objections and appeals were collated remotely via the use of a QR code, today data is collected physically and privately. However, there seems to be evidence of political interference within the process, per Minister Semasinghe. The State Minister said that the general public can contact hotline number 1924. That's 1924, which is operational on Wednesdays from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. for further inquiries on the welfare benefit scheme.
වහුගඩු රෝගී දීමනාව ලබන වැඩිහිටි දීමනාව ලබන සහ ආබාධිත දීමනාව ලබන පුද්ගලයන්ගේ නාම ලේඛනය අපි මේ සතිය අවසාන වෙද්දී ප්‍රසිද්ධ කිරීමට පියවර ගන්නවා. ඒ හින්දා තමන්ගේ නම යම් කිසි තැනක ප්‍රසිද්ධියටපත් වෙලා නැත්නම් ඒ පිළිබඳව කලබල වෙන්න එපා. මේක අවසාන ලේඛනය නෙවෙයි. පළවෙනි වරට තේරිච්ච කණ්ඩායම සුදුසුද නුසුසුද කියලා අපිට තීන්දුව කරන්න වෙන්නේ අභියාචනා සහ විරෝධතා සලකලා බලලා. අභියාචනා 1,88,794ක් විරෝධතා 3,304යි මේව මොහොත වන විට අපිට ලැබිලා තියෙන්නේ. අභියාචනා සහ විරෝධතා ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න මුලින්ම තිබ්බේ මාර්ගගත ක්‍රමයට පමණයි. මොකද මේ QR කෝඩ් එකක් දීලා තමයි මේ සමීක්ෂණය කරේ. එතනින් අපි වෙනස් කරලා යම් අභියාචනයක් හෝ විරෝධතාවයක් පෞද්ගලිකවම ප්‍රාදේශීය ලේකම් කාර්යාලයට අනන්‍යතාවය තහවුරු කරන්නේ නැතුව බාර ගන්න අවශ්‍ය උපදෙස් ටික ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා. මේ පිටුපස්සේ දේශපාලන හස්තයකුත් ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා. අභියාචනා වගේම විරෝධතා අනුව ඊට පස්සෙත් යම් කිසි කෙනෙක් අසාධාරණ ලෙස ඉවත් වීමක් සිදු වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් ඒ අයටත් වහාම සාධාරණය කරන්න අපි අවශ්‍ය කටයුතු කරනවා.
The Secretary General of the Joint Apparel Association Forum, Johan Lawrence, says a downward adjustment in industrial electricity tariffs is essential for the apparel sector to stay competitive in the global market. Addressing the stakeholder consultation on the proposed electricity tariff revision, Lawrence called for a further reduction in electricity tariffs from the proposed revision by the Ceylon Electricity Board.
A stakeholder consultation on the proposed electricity tariff revision organised by the Public Utilities Commission was held in BMICH today. Addressing the event, the Secretary General of Joint Apparel Association Forum, Johan Lawrence, highlighted the importance of a downward adjustment in industrial electricity tariffs.
Sri Lanka needs to be competitive in the international market. Energy pricing is not competitive, and unless we have an adjustment in the industrial tariff, Sri Lanka will further lose our competitive edge and result in a further loss of earnings and of employment in the sector. The situation has been made worse with the change in the rupee. Our energy costs in USD are now significantly higher than our competitor countries. So if you look at the industrial tariff for the apparel sector, this CV overestimation of demand was something that we had highlighted at our previous submissions to the PCUSL. The overestimation of demand meant that it meant you needed more furnace oil, more coal, more fuel and more high cost items. But the actual demand was in fact 10% less than was forecasted by the CV. Our position in this is that if the CV demand and the CV documents allude to this fact that there has been an overestimation of demand. The existing tariff was proposed. We made the point that the demand has been overestimated and that overestimation of demand will lead to unfairly high pricing. We are perfectly fine with having cost-reflective pricing, but it must be the correct cost. Price of coal, current prices versus prices that we had in December and even January last year when we set the tariff, price of coal has fallen. And this was one of the arguments that was put forward for the increased tariff was that coal prices had increased. Now that coal prices have reduced, we are at a loss to understand why this reduction is not translated into a reduction of the industrial tariff. The exchange rate has also appreciated, and therefore this again, given that CB's cost of import is largely dollar-based cost, that has to mean that there is a reduction in cost. And again, our urge is that this reduction in cost should be reflected in the industrial tariff. We need also to push for increased renewable investment, increased investment in renewables, because this has been proved to be the case that this will help to reduce the overall cost. If Sri Lanka doesn't make massive investments in renewable energy, our costs of energy will just continue to rise. The government has already declared a 70 or 80% renewable energy by 2030. We're far away from that. I think we're currently at about 40%. How we are going to double our renewable energy without serious investments in the sector is unfathomable. Our submission is that there is ample evidence to prove that there is room for a reduction in the tariff. The CV documentation also supports this. We believe the tariff reduction is actually bigger than the CV is contemplating.
In stocks news, the Colombo Bourse closed lower on today, dragged down by consumer staples and communication service stocks. The Colombo Stock Exchange All-Share Index closed lower today by 0.69% at 9,368.91 points, sliding after rising for 4 straight sessions. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to market turnover today, while the banking sector was the second highest contributor. Trading volumes fell to 57 million shares from 90.4 million shares in the previous session. The equity market turnover fell to 1.45 billion rupees from 2.23 billion rupees in the previous session. Foreign investors were net buyers in the equity market, purchasing shares worth 204.6 million rupees, while domestic investors were offloaded, shares worth 1.41 billion rupees. With that, let's have a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. That brings me to the end of my bulletin for this evening. Thank you for joining me today. Do join in tomorrow at 9 p.m. tomorrow evening, or log on to www.adaderana.lk for a comprehensive roundup of the latest news. I'm Jonathan Benedict, wishing you a good night.